They wanted to bomb their own country and blame someone else for it. This is not a theory. This is a document written by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, presented to the Secretary of Defense in 1962. It has a name: Operation Northwoods. In our last episode, we opened the Cuba Manual, a CIA document that turned coercion into a science, written by the same government, in the same era, with the same cold logic. Cuba was about breaking one person at a time. Northwoods was bigger. It was about breaking an entire country's understanding of the truth. Here is what the document actually proposed. On March 13, 1962, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Lyman Lemnitzer, presented a document to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. Its title was Justification for United States Military Intervention in Cuba. Its purpose was simple: create a reason for war. Fidel Castro had taken power in Cuba in 1959. By 1962, the United States military wanted him gone. But the American public needed a reason to support an invasion. So the Joint Chiefs proposed manufacturing one. The plan called for staged attacks on American military and civilian targets, attacks that would be blamed on Cuba, attacks that never actually came from Cuba, because the United States would carry them out itself. Let us go through exactly what was proposed, in their own words. The document describes a fake shoot-down of a United States Air Force aircraft, not a real one, a staged one. The plan involved a drone aircraft disguised to look like a manned passenger plane. It would be flown near Cuba, then destroyed remotely. To the public, it would appear Cuban forces shot down an American aircraft full of civilians. The document also proposes remote controlling civilian aircraft, repainting them to look like United States military planes, then destroying them and blaming Cuba. It proposes sinking boats carrying Cuban refugees on the high seas and blaming the deaths on the Cuban government. It proposes staging the assassination of Cuban immigrants living in the United States to be blamed on Castro's agents. It proposes blowing up a United States ship in Guantanamo Bay and staging funerals for fictional casualties to build public outrage. It proposes rigging buildings in Washington and Miami with explosives, arresting undercover CIA agents posing as Cuban operatives, having them confess publicly to bombings they did not commit. It proposes planting false documents proving Castro's involvement, then handing those forged documents directly to the press. The document even considered bribing one of Castro's own commanders to stage an attack on the American base at Guantanamo Bay, to be paid for using taxpayer funds. This is not speculation. These are the words in a real declassified United States government document. Why would anyone write this down? By 1962, tension between President Kennedy and the Joint Chiefs of Staff was already high. The Bay of Pigs invasion the year before had failed badly, and Lemnitzer had personally pushed Kennedy to commit full American military force to save it. Kennedy refused. He told his advisors he thought Lemnitzer was, in his words, a dope. Many in the Joint Chiefs saw Kennedy as weak on Cuba. Some believed removing Castro required a war the public would never support, unless they were given a reason to. Northwoods was that reason, manufactured from nothing. What happened next? Kennedy rejected it. On March 16, 1962, 3 days after the document reached the Pentagon, Lemnitzer brought the plan directly to the president in the Oval Office. According to notes taken by Edward Lansdale, who ran the broader anti-Castro program, Lemnitzer told Kennedy the military had, quote, plans for creating plausible pretexts to use force, with the pretext being either attacks on United States aircraft or a Cuban action elsewhere that America could retaliate against. Kennedy did not hesitate. He told Lemnitzer bluntly that they were not discussing the use of military force, and he reminded the general that the United States might find itself needed elsewhere, in Berlin, if the Soviets responded to a move in Cuba by escalating in Europe. There was no invasion, no staged attacks, no war with Cuba built on manufactured incidents. 3 months later, Kennedy removed Lemnitzer as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Officially, it was a transfer. Lemnitzer was sent to Europe to become Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. Unofficially, it was Kennedy making sure the man who proposed bombing American cities would never hold that position again. This is the part of the story that makes Northwoods different from Kubark. Kubark was implemented, used, trained, applied to real people in real interrogation rooms. Northwoods never left the page. How did this stay hidden for so long? For 35 years, Operation Northwoods sat buried in classified military archives. It was not declassified because someone leaked it. It was declassified because of a law. In 1992, following renewed public pressure after Oliver Stone's film about the Kennedy assassination, Congress passed the John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act. It required the declassification of documents related to the Kennedy assassination. Under that act, a review board released 4 million pages of previously classified material. Operation Northwoods was one of them, declassified on November 18, 1997. But even then, almost nobody noticed. It sat unread in the National Archives for 4 more years. 4 million pages is not something any single person reads casually. It requires someone willing to go through boxes of Cold War bureaucracy, page by page, looking for something specific. In 2001, journalist James Bamford found it. He was researching a book about the National Security Agency, working through the declassified JFK collection at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland. Somewhere in those boxes, buried among thousands of unrelated military memos, he found the Northwoods proposal. He published it in his book, Body of Secrets. Only one news outlet picked up the story at the time. The network ABC News ran a single article. The rest of the American press largely ignored it. Northwoods became public knowledge only because one journalist was willing to read what almost nobody else would. Now, here's where it gets worse. This next part is not in the files, but here is what we know. Northwoods was rejected. But it was not an isolated idea. The same year, under the broader anti-Castro program called Operation Mongoose, other proposals used the same logic. One, called Operation Dirty Trick, proposed blaming Cuba if the 1962 Mercury spaceflight carrying astronaut John Glenn had failed. Another plan considered manufacturing or acquiring Soviet-style aircraft inside the United States to be used in staged attacks that could be blamed on a foreign enemy. The mindset behind Northwoods was not one document. It was a pattern. Kennedy rejected all of it. But the fact that the head of every branch of the United States military gave written approval to a plan involving sinking ships, shooting down aircraft, and staging bombings on American soil, and presented it formally to the Secretary of Defense, tells you something about what was considered an acceptable proposal at the highest levels of American government in 1962. No one involved ever faced legal consequences. Lemnitzer retired with full honors and died in 1988, 9 years before the public ever learned what he had proposed. Operation Northwoods was never executed. Nobody died because of this specific document. But it proves something that matters far beyond Cuba. It proves that the senior leadership of the United States military was willing, on paper, with signatures, to manufacture attacks on American citizens. Fake deaths, fake casualties, a fake war, all to justify a real invasion. It was written down, presented formally, approved by the Joint Chiefs. Only one man's refusal stood between this plan and reality. Kennedy said no. The next president might not have. This next part is not in the files, but here is what we know. Kennedy rejected Northwoods in March of 1962. He was assassinated in November of 1963. We are not saying these events are connected. There is no declassified document linking Northwoods to his death. What we are saying is this. In the span of 20 months, Kennedy clashed with his own Joint Chiefs of Staff over Cuba, survived the Cuban Missile Crisis, announced a test ban treaty that further angered military leadership, and removed the man who proposed staging attacks on American soil. Then he was killed. We are not connecting those dots for you tonight. but we will be back to look closer in a future episode. Up next, on the Realize Files, we explore Project Stargate, exposing real lies. With real eyes.